Did your life change when you met Jesus? Unfortunately, for so many people our age, I feel like the answer to that question is no. For so many of us, it's obvious and we can understand in our heads that we need a relationship with Jesus, that we need him to forgive our sins so that we could go to heaven one day. But it's kind of hard for us to understand, what does that have to do with my life right now? And one of the things I've loved so much about 1 Peter, what we've been reading this week together, is that in the first 4 chapters, we talked a lot about hope. We talked a lot about what it looks like for us to have a relationship with Jesus. But one of my favorite things about chapter 5 that we're going to talk about today is that we start to move out of the vertical, our relationship with Jesus, to how does that affect the way that we live? I think that question is so important to answer, because if we don't answer it honestly, then Jesus just becomes an insurance policy. He just becomes that thing that we believe in and then put on the back burner, and we know that we're good. And if he doesn't seep into every aspect of our life and affect the way that we live, then we're missing a true relationship with him. And so the beginning of chapter 5 of 1 Peter, it talks about this idea of elders, of older people in the church, leading the community of believers. And then Peter writes something really interesting. He says, in the same way too, the younger men should submit to the elders, but let all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. I love that idea. That even though we're being led, because ultimately we are the younger people in the church, even though we're being led and we need to submit ourselves to the authority of those older and wiser than us, they also are supposed to clothe themselves in humility. Because ultimately, the reason we're able to be humble, the reason we're able to submit and walk alongside people in life is because of our relationship with Jesus. Because of what we have between us and him, because of our personal knowledge of his saving grace and love in our life, we are able to interact in love, grace, and patience with everyone around us. Verse 6 says, humble yourselves then under God's powerful hand so that he may lift you up at the right time. Throw all your cares upon him because he cares about you. That's such a powerful idea, that God cares about us, that we have a Father in heaven who's more powerful than we could ever imagine, and still he cares for me and he cares for you so deeply. But the most important thing is remembering that care, that relationship that we have with God is not something that's only meant to be experienced alone. And I think so often we think of it that way. We think of, if I want to get stronger in my faith, if I want to grow, that's between me and God. I just need to seek him out on my own. And that's so true. It is so important to experience God and Jesus in the quiet of our heart and our soul, but he's also meant to be experienced in community. He's also meant to be experienced in the love that we have for the people around us. In those conversations that are really hard, where we have to choose to walk in grace, God is there. He was always meant to be a part of everything that we do. And so what's really cool about this 5th chapter of 1 Peter is right in the middle, it says this. It says, stay in control of yourselves, stay awake. Your enemy, the devil, is stalking around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. That's like the only negative line in this whole book. And it talks about how we have an enemy. We're at battle. We're at war. We're fighting against the powers and the forces of evil. They're fighting for our heart, and we're at war against them. But what's so incredible to me is right after that verse, it says, resist him, staying resolute in your faith. We think about that. We think resolute in my faith. That's something that I have to do. I have to stand strong all by myself. But if we keep reading, it says, and knowing that other family members in the rest of the world are facing identical suffering. Peter knew that you can't stand resolute in your faith against the forces of evil alone. And so what he was trying to do for the believers that he was writing this letter to was connect them to their brothers and sisters in Jesus. He was trying to remind them that they were not alone. And the same thing is true for you right now. Watching this video in quarantine, it's been over a month now. Schools are closed. We can't see our friends. Life is hard. We're fighting against the powers of evil in this world. And maybe there's some things like anxiety and depression and frustration that are just boiling up inside of you as a result of being alone so much during this time. What Peter was trying to say to first century believers is still so true for us. That we need to be connected to the people around us. That when we stand firm in our faith, when we're resolute in our faith, that always looks like linking arms with our brothers and sisters in Jesus and facing our battles and our hardships head on. Because ultimately, following Jesus is about having a personal relationship with him, but that relationship should affect every other area of our life always.